Well, folks, once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Captain Boat Builder. Today is episode number 4, and I call this Prefinishing the Hull Panels. And before we get into that, I'd like to make some corrections. I do try to make this as accurate as possible, and I realize that I made just a few mistakes on previous videos. In the last video, you might have noticed that I referred to some of the fiberglass work as 4-inch fiberglass. And what I really meant was 4 ounce. 4 ounce was the weight of the cloth that I'd been using inside and outside the boat. I also made a mistake in the construction earlier on. I can't believe I did this. I can't tell you how many batches of resin I've mixed, but in this particular case, I mixed the resin and I mixed in the hardener and I didn't stir it up. And as a result, when I put it on, it was just glop. And fortunately, everything you need to know is on YouTube, and there's a YouTube explanation on how to get this stuff off. And I have a brief section on that. So the good news is, with almost anything on these little boats, if you make a mistake, you can fix it. Another mistake I made had to do with the glue and the excess glue that I used when I glued the butt plates on. And the problem I had with that excess glue sort of interfering with some cleats, pieces of wood that have to be glued onto the sides of the hull. So I've tried to correct those things. Glad to have you back. The picture that you're looking at is Michael Storer. He's the designer of the boat. This particular shot was one of the ones that got me interested in the boat in the first place. I like the way it looks, and I'll probably paint my boat in a similar fashion. So I hope you enjoy the episode today, and let's get started. So continuing with trying to fix the mess I've made, you can see here, there's a scraper I've been using, and if you look closely, you can see the mixture of resin and hardener that was not properly mixed, and so it's still almost liquid. This has been on these panels for about 2 weeks, so obviously it's not going to change. So from looking at YouTube's for guidance, what I have to do here is I have to scrape all of the soft stuff off, and you can see what a panel looks like after I've done about the best scraping I can do. And then you go over it with alcohol and a paper towel and try to get as much residue as possible. So unfortunately, this is what you have to go through when you forget to mix the resin, which I'm embarrassed to tell you, I actually did it. So again, it's the scraper to get off the soft stuff, the alcohol to get off as much residue as possible. Then you go over it with 80 grit sandpaper to get whatever's left, and then you're in pretty good shape for the next coat. So I hope you don't forget to mix. So I've been talking a lot about these butt straps, butt plate, butt block, whatever you want to call it. This is where 2 planks are butted up against each other. And this is what the butt strap, you can see on the label here, this is what the butt straps look like. Now this one is going to be on the topside planking, but it's going to be on the inside, and because of its location, it's going to be inside the flotation tank, so you will not see it. But I wanted to show you what these look like. This is, again, this is the inside of the boat. And it's a pretty sloppy glue job on my part. You can see here there's way too much glue all the way around. I should have wiped all this clean, but I didn't. But my point is that these butt straps, if you don't eliminate them the way I did by joining the planks together with fiberglass tape and a layer of cloth, you're going to have these butt plates, butt straps. These are going to be in the cockpit on the floor, just about where you put your feet. And they can certainly be, the edges can be smoothed over, they can be trimmed with compound so that they look a little bit less obvious. But cosmetically, I just didn't want them in the boat where my feet go. So again, on the floor panel and the 2 bilge panels, I've been able to eliminate these things, so I'm going to have a nice smooth floor. Wanted to show you another little mistake that I made. If you look at this panel here, this is the topside panel. This is the port topside panel. And this edge right here, this is the top of it. And you can see where the bow curves up just a little bit. And if you look at the space between the two pieces of green tape, that's the area that is covered up by the flotation tank. And the mistake that I made is that right here, the butt block that I used to glue to connect the two pieces of the top side together, again, it's behind the flotation tank that you're not going to see it. But you may recall that I mentioned that I was a little sloppy with the glue and I piled up too much glue. I didn't think it would make a difference, but in fact it has, because if you look here, right here, you can see all this glue that's piled up. Well, this piece of wood is the cleat that has to run the length of the flotation tank. And because I've got too much glue in here, it doesn't quite lay flush. And you can see over here, this is the one for the other side, and I've got the same problem. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to sand all this epoxy away so that I get a nice tight fit of this cleat against the topside planking. So when you put these cleats on, be sure you don't make a big mess like I did. And the other thing is, of course, here, be sure that they're down far enough so that you have clearance. If you space them pretty much in the middle, you'll have clearance on both sides. So there's another mistake I've made. I hope you don't make it, and this will save you a little time. So you'll recall that I mentioned that I would be deviating a little bit from the instruction manual, and I'm trying to get a better finish and maybe do a lot less sanding, in particular in a very uncomfortable body position. So what you can see here is I've got the two sections. These are the topside planks glued together to the full 14-foot length. And right here, you're looking at 3 coats of wet on wet epoxy. And this is what it looks like. It's just 3 coats to coat the outside of the topside planks. You can see that it's pretty bumpy. It didn't flow out as smoothly as I expected. It did raise up the grain, so it's pretty bumpy. Then as we go down here a little further, this is what it looks like when you sand this with what they refer to as a longboard. The particular one that I use is almost a contradiction in terms, because as you can see it right here, you can see that it's not very long. So this is what I call the short longboard. But the advantage of this is that you put the paper on the back side and you have an absolutely flat surface. There's a little bit of foam here to take up just a little bit of the stress. The sandpaper for it, which you can order from Amazon, comes in a large roll. This happens to be 80 grit. And it's got adhesive on one side, so when you peel the adhesive off, it sticks a little bit to the rubber surface and it stays in place. And the advantage of this is that you get completely flat sanding. So this is what it looks like. This is what the top side, first coated with 3 coats of resin. This is what it looks like when you use the longboard on it. It's pretty obvious, looking at the shiny parts, that these are the low parts. And the dull part, that's the part that's been sanded off. But it's pretty clear also, especially if you look at an area like this, it's pretty clear that it's not exactly smooth and it's not exactly flat. And I thought, you know, if I have to sand this with the longboard down till it's completely even, it's going to take a lot of sanding. So what I've done that works, I think, beautifully, is I've used my random orbital sander here. I've got my shop vac hooked up to it, so that sucks a lot of the dust out. This is the paper that I've been using. It's a stick-on 120 grit. And what you get is something that looks like this. This has been sanded with the random orbital sander, and then I went over it a little bit with the longboard. And you can see that there's hardly any shiny spots. There's a few, right, can't quite pick them up. There's a few right in here, but very, very few. And they're going to be picked up by the primer. So the routine that I'm going to be using is I'm going to go over these planks first with the random orbital with 120 paper. Then I'm going to go over it with the short longboard with 80 grit to get any imperfections that I've missed, similar to what you can see right here. And the reason that I'm doing all of this is because with a setup like this, sanding on top of the sawhorses, you're sanding in the horizontal, you're standing up so you're not bent over. I've spent way too many hours in other boats sanding in very awkward body positions. So this is what I'm trying to avoid. And my hope is that by the time I put the boat together, these panels will be pre-coated with 3 coats of epoxy. They will also be prepared with 2 coats of high build paint primer, which will be sanded almost completely off. And I may even put on a couple of finish coats. And so then, rather than having to sand while the boat's on its side or right side up, or have to reach over and bend and get in unusual body positions, I will have done almost all the work in a very relaxed, flat position, and I'll only be concentrating on the seams, the joins between the planks. So this is the technique that I'm using, which is a little bit different than what's recommended in the instructions, as a way to take it easy on my old back and also get almost a perfectly flat finish even before I put the boat together. So here we have the 3 bottom panels. The center panel, that's what they call the floor. The 2 panels on the side, which will be angled up slightly, those are called the bilge panels. Down here at this end, we're working on 3 coats of epoxy with no fiberglass. This is what's called for in the plan. Then as you look further, you can see between the green marks, we got 3 coats of epoxy, and under that we have the 4-ounce fiberglass cloth. And again, we've got the joins here, which is the 2-ounce tape covered with the 4-ounce cloth. We've got a little extra resin on there. We're going to be smoothing that out. And down here at the other end, we've got the same thing. These will be receiving 1 more coat of epoxy and then sanded smooth. So this will all be sanded smooth, and it's going to look like this. And this is the part where I've deviated from the plan, because in between the tape here and in between the tape down there, we've got 4 ounces of fiberglass cloth. And the idea is to get a perfectly smooth floor and bilge before we assemble everything. Make the boat maybe a little stronger, which might be unnecessary. And again, as Michael has specified in the original plan, there would be no fiberglass cloth on the inside, only on the outside. And this is to reduce weight, but I'm not quite so concerned about weight as he is. Anyhow, that's the progress on these floor panels now. Well, folks, that's about it for today. The next video, we'll be dealing with painting all of these hull panels, mostly on the inside, partially on the outside, in preparation for putting the boat together. This has been a slow process and a little bit tedious. I'm hoping that when I get it all done, I'm going to think it's worth it, and deviating from the sequence a little bit helped, and we'll have a nice finish. So once again, thanks for watching. Captain Boat Builder saying so long for now.